Hello, welcome to another in our series of CMMI Tech Talks, looking at specific practice areas within the CMMI model. Today, we're going to review the peer reviews, or PR, practice area. We will discuss the intent of this practice area and look at what value it can provide to an organization, as well as looking at the individual practices to see how they can be used to help drive out defects in our solutions, products, or services early in the development cycle. PR is one of 4 practice areas within the ensuring quality capability area, which is in the doing category. The ensuring quality capability area contains practice areas, or PAs, that look at the subject of quality from many different viewpoints. Peer reviews focuses on the identification and resolution of issues in our processes and work products by reviews conducted by the producer's peers, who is a subject matter expert with similar skills. We shall start our tour by looking at the key mandatory model components, the high-level intent and value statements. Intent identifies and addresses process performance and work product issues through reviews by the producer's peers or subject matter experts, SMEs. Value reduces cost and rework by uncovering issues or defects early. Let us focus our attention on the last part of the intent statement to start with. A crucial aspect of a peer review is that, as the name suggests, it should be performed by the producer's peers. We need to be very clear here on what we mean by a peer, as we could potentially apply many different interpretations, not all of which would necessarily be helpful or relevant. For example, we often use the term peers in a social context in which they are the group of people with whom we might socialize or share certain interests. However, this does not necessarily make them qualified to review a design specification that we have just crafted. According to the CMMI glossary, a peer review is the examination of work products performed by similarly skilled personnel during the development of work products to identify defects for removal. The key phrase here is similarly skilled. When we refer to peers in this context, we mean individuals or groups who share a common skill set or who can offer comparable experience and expertise in the subject concerned, and can therefore be considered as subject matter experts. Turning to the value statement for a moment, the main benefit of peer reviews is to uncover issues or defects early. There is a huge body of historical industry data that proves that it costs less to fix bugs the earlier we find them in the life cycle. And there is in fact an exponential relationship between the two. And the following graph shows the growth in cost the later in the life cycle that defects are found and fixed. Hence, investing in peer reviews can be extremely cost-effective for an organization if performed consistently well. Many agile development organizations employ pair programming approaches for much of their development work, where 2 developers work to develop, integrate, and test code together. This has been proven to be a highly efficient way of identifying and removing defects and represents, in effect, a continuous peer review. Time spent in the developmental effort is usually offset by a significant reduction in escaped defects when this approach is employed effectively. The practices of peer reviews go up to practice group level 3 and reflect the expected evolutionary progression towards increasing capability. The level 1 practices simply direct us to perform some reviews of work products and services. At level 2, we encounter practices that encourage more preparing for, conducting, and managing peer review activities by selecting components to be examined, choosing the procedures and review methods that will be employed, and ensuring any identified issues are resolved. Finally, at level 3, we bring an organizational perspective to peer reviews by analyzing review data and results and feeding the conclusions into our organizational review processes. Let us turn now to the individual practices within the PR practice area. PR 1.1 is a typical Level 1 practice. It urges us to perform some peer reviews of our work products, but is otherwise silent on how to go about this or what form these reviews should take. Level 1 practices are intended to get us started and perform the basics without worrying too much about the specific details. The key point is that by performing some form of review on our work products, we will immediately start to reap benefits as we begin to identify defects that might otherwise escape to a later life cycle phase. Notice that the practice is directing us to focus on the work products that are produced because of working through a process rather than the processes themselves, although many organizations also use peer reviews to verify and improve processes. At Level 2, the practices of PR become a little more specific as to what things we ought to consider to make our peer reviews more effective. PR 2.1 begins by directing us to develop procedures and supporting materials to help us prepare for and perform peer reviews. There are a wide range of review methods and processes available to use, and CMMI as a non-prescriptive framework of best practice does not advocate any particular approach. As we have seen in our initial discussion of the intent and practice of this PA, the real key to successful peer reviews is the expertise of the reviewer, not the method of review. Hence, a simple desk check by a fellow team member can be a very effective informal peer review technique that may be appropriate in some situations. In other situations, we may want a more structured and resource-intensive review, such as a formal code walkthrough or structured review of plans, processes, or key deliverables. This introduces more formality and rigor into the peer review process and is highly effective if used correctly. This practice is really asking us to consider what would be the most effective and efficient method to use for a given situation. Whatever approach we choose, there is likely to be some need for supporting material, which should be given to the reviewer to help them undertake the review. In the example of a simple code check, we would probably want to make sure the reviewer had the design and specification material that the module was implementing, along with possibly any mandated coding standards. For a structured walkthrough, by contrast, we might want to assign different reviewers different areas of interest, or review roles to direct them to look for issues in a specific aspect of the work product. If we look forward to the Level 3 practices in PR, we might also want to ensure we have some formal, structured way of capturing review comments so that we can analyze this data later. Perspective-based reading is another type of peer review, where each peer reviewer is assigned a specific perspective of what to look for, such as grammar issues or technical content, and based on the principle that a human will generally find something more easily and consistently if they have something specific you are looking for. PR 2.2 requires us to think about what products we want to subject to a peer review. Not all work products produced as a result of following a process may necessarily need to be reviewed. Given that reviews can be quite labor-intensive activities, it is generally not practical to review everything. This practice is looking for us to evaluate the relative importance or criticality of our work products to identify and prioritize which ones we should invest review effort in, and what type of review is required. For example, if we were bidding for some work to provide online services to a potential customer, the proposed service level agreement that we intend to include as part of our contract would be a critical work product, and we would probably want to subject that to a very detailed peer review before submitting the bid. However, a draft agenda for a meeting to discuss the SLA proposal prior to submission probably would not warrant anything more than a cursory, informal review, if even needed. Once we have identified what work products we intend to review and what procedures we will follow for each, PR 2.3 directs us to prepare and then conduct those reviews using the agreed procedures. Preparation includes within it the planning and scheduling of review activities. This is an important point and a key aspect of a Level 2 type of approach. While at level 1, there is no expectation of a planned and managed approach, at level 2, there is. Even relative information reviews can be resource intensive, so we need to ensure that our review activities have been properly planned, aligned, and managed as part of the wider project activities. If we expect subject matter experts to carry out these reviews, then we need to ensure that they are available to do so. People with specialist roles and skills are usually quite heavily loaded with work, so reserving their time and ensuring their availability is essential and needs forward planning. The output of a peer review will be the set of issues the reviewers have identified. PR 2.4 is concerned with ensuring all identified issues are resolved. There is little point in performing a peer review if we ignore the review findings. Usually, if an issue has been identified, we would expect to see some action being taken to address that issue. Under certain circumstances, we may choose to defer fixing a problem until a later release of our solution, product, or service. Or we may discuss a finding with the reviewer and agree it isn't an issue after all. For example, a reviewer may have identified a suggested improvement which is beyond the scope of the current specification. This may happen where we have multiple reviewers looking at the same work product from different perspectives and with different competing agendas. There is a single level 3 practice in the peer reviews practice area, and as we might expect, this brings with it an organizational perspective. As we saw in the PR intent and value statements, we conduct peer reviews to identify and remove defects as early as possible in the process. In doing so, as well as fixing project issues, we may be able to identify trends and recurring problems across all projects within an organization. If we see the same type of review comments occurring across multiple projects, then this might point to an underlying weakness in the process which gave rise to the work product being reviewed. Alternatively, it might indicate that some specific targeted training may be needed across the company to ensure these issues don't keep recurring. PR 3.1 looks for us to start to analyze data from peer reviews across the organization with a view to uncovering systemic issues or possible improvements in both our review and development processes. These can then be incorporated into the organizational process, improvement process, to help us evolve and streamline our processes. These then are the practices of the peer reviews practice area. To summarize the main points, PR covers developing peer review procedures, identifying where to use peer reviews and what approaches to employ, planning, preparing for, and conducting peer reviews in accordance with agreed procedures, and resolving identified issues and analyzing peer review data to identify improvements. Thank you for joining us for this CMMI Tech Talk. If you have questions, please contact us at support.isaca.org.